Welcome to Precise Elements. In this video, we're looking at the dialectic of Plato. The dialectic of Plato must be viewed as a wholeness, and the whole of his dialectic is a movement internally towards the good. For this part of our presentation, we will use the symbol of a triangle to represent the meaning of each term and its method. For fun, we are called this triangle the golden triangle of late Platonism. And this is a very condensed presentation. We begin by reminding ourselves that the omnipresence of true being or real existence forms the substrate of all forward-rolling internal and external projections. Using our golden triangle, it looks like this. At the apex of the triangle, we have the good. Under the good, we have the intelligible order, which is the unified. We have the dianoetic order. Here, the Greek word eikon, image or likeness, is applicable. And on the other side, we have the middle, which is imitation or likeness, imitation symmetry. Proportion is another word that's used. I prefer symmetry. Then under that, we have the sensible order. This is the order of the wholeness of the soul, the world soul. And under that, we have the projective participative interaction of the external mundane worlds, of nature, of matter, of harmonics, all according to subjection and participation. With this synopsis, the following orientation is going to be necessary. The dialectic of Plato cannot be viewed as external to the thinker, but it is intrinsic to an internal dialogue that the thinker has with himself or herself. The essence of the dialectic of Plato possesses through its projective design the aim to elevate the soul in a search for the most simple ideas to the good. But after all the things that have been said across the ages of Plato and of our world, what are the methods of this dialectic? Let's see what Socrates teaches us. In the Phaedo, one of Plato's dialogues on the human soul, the spirit or the mind, he says there are 4 methods of knowledge in the whole dialectic of Plato. These 4 methods and their psychology are symbolic of the orders of internal projection, beginning with the senses, with matter and opinion, and which end in the most simple assumption. We will mention these methods synoptically and repeat them with the means of our triangle successively. The first method is opinion and sense, the automata of self-consciousness, of the fantasy. The fantasy is the whole perception, and of conjecture. Conjecture is contains both, at this level, both the true and the false, the perceiving of the equal and the unequal experience, the swift judging, fast-moving world. This is the theater of sense interaction with the world, and the world, the perception of the world is accepted for what it is. Socrates says that thing is a feature of this automata. The second method is the logical method, logic and science. We have heuristics, our heuristic selection hypotheses. We have the logical, mathematical, and empirical as a summit, the arrows pointing, indicating interaction, pointing upwards. The summit of our sciences, the sensible world, symbolic logic, and our modern heuristics. The interaction, cognitive and empirical, investigative, looking at all kinds of notions, ideas, and hypotheses, thought experiments. What is necessary for this? A disciplined cognitive fantasy, selection, establishing hypotheses, and arrives at the understanding of the why. However, with this, there is still ignorance with respect to principles, requires a depth investigation of the things that we posit, of our thought experiments, of the things that we learn, and the many fields that we investigate. Today we don't investigate many fields. We have a singular field of application of learning. That's not what we mean here. We mean a broad range of subjects. An investigation of what they are, what they say, what do we believe about these things, and discarding the things that we found to be wanting. But here we practice an active form of attention, and establish the capability of presence and awareness. Socrates teaches us the whole dialectic inquiry endeavors to arrive at the most simple, the principle itself, employing for this purpose internal steps of learning and assent, and which ends in the nature of the good, the apex of the dialectic inquiry of Plato. Here we can have visualization of a ladder that we climb up. On each step, we climb up in our understanding. And each understanding is an insight. This part of the dialectic method, the third method, says Proclus, uses divisions, analysis, as well as definitions, collecting into one from many things and many things from one thing. There's also the demonstrative fantasy. The art of demonstration is what it was called in late antiquity. And here, says Socrates, we find wonderful arguments. But what does he mean with division and analysis? The third method is far more extensive than the previous two methods. When we look at our triangle, in the left corner we have separation. Well, this separation pertains to the separation of psyche from unity, complexity from simplicity. And the whole investigation of the method of division and multiplication, if you like, is the investigation according to participation and the causes of difference, a separation from unity. At the apex, we have the dianoetic middle that contains universal images, likenesses of ideas. And on the right-hand corner, the conversion of psyche. Analysis is the investigation of the conversion of external projections to unity. And it is done through the similar and the equal. For the similar and the equal is more simple and less complex than the dissimilar and the unequal. That's analysis up and down from the dianoetic middle to external sense. In other words, the whole discursus is an investigation through the analysis of what is similar upwardly and downwardly. And if we look at the base of our triangle, we have individual contemplation and learning across time. The Greek word we're looking for is nouristai, self-moved, meaning self-moved. The soul moves herself to the middle. The middle is the upper apex of our triangle. To universal images, to likeness. The core of the third method then is division and analysis. Division signifies external projection and the movement of psyche and her separation from unity. That is to say, participation through the causes of division and difference. And analysis signifies the internal projective and upward conversion of knowledge of psyche in the sphere of the separated individual psyche to unity. Again, this investigation and analysis is conducted according to the causes of the similar and the equal or the same, such as, for example, love is the binder of all natures, and love looks for what is similar to itself in this conversion. Both these analysis and divisions are investigated then according to causal arguments, beginning with the external sensing world and ending with the internal summit of the dianoetic order, the true universal, who contains images, imitation symmetries, images or the likeness of real being. So in our triangle, we have the dianoetic summit, we have division and analysis, we have the external separation of psyche, we have an internal conversion and upward of psyche, we have nouristai, the self moved to the middle through an upward movement, convertive movement, and internal movement of psyche. We have silence, aloneness, as the interactive method. The sum of the dividing and the analytical method and their contemplative practice signifies a forming change in the interior relations of knowledge that governs the sphere of cognition of the perceiver and his or her world perspective. This internal transformation, which is convertive, leads the contemplator inward and upward to the discovery of the most simple. Socrates teaches us that this internal projective process of psychological conversion according to the similar indicates an inward looking and an upward participation of the soul and a change in the internal projective psychology that governs the internal relations of knowledge of the rational mind or the soul or the human spirit. We have in our triangle, we have in the apex, we have the universal governors of all external natures. We have on the left side where we have the two arrows on the one arrow on the left depicting the interaction of the contemplator, the psychological perspective, inward looking, always being drawn up to universals. The whole practice of the third method is to establish oneself in the dialectic order. Knowledge is the internal governor of all participations. And in the middle of our triangle, we have a change in self-knowledge, the convertive. And on the other side, on the right side, from our perspective, we have the contemplative. Then the Greek term that we are looking for is to dianestai, the fact of thinking. Says the definition, is a speech, logos, that the soul herself conducts from beginning to end with herself on what she examines, all internal, no words needed. The analogy here is of the building of a scaffold, an intellectual and a theoretical scaffold, the upper platform of which to view the whole psychological unfoldment. This scaffold, with its divisive and analytical aspects, this is not the analytics of Aristotle, it's different, is a preparation to the fourth mode, the fourth method of discovery. The dialectic order contains the true universals that are the governors of, says Socrates, mathematical, geometrical, psychological, and harmonical participations according to cause, external division, and internal conversion. But what is needed for the fourth method? The whole fantasy, that is to say, the whole of the possession of your perception, that is to say, your self-disciplined intellect moves itself internally through choice and study to this fourth method. Perhaps a way to understand this is to say that when the sensa, the theater of the senses, is on autopilot, this intellect sleeps. The intelligible order and its united unity is above the dialectic order. Hence, unity and unification is the subject of the fourth method. The means of internal reaching, of longing, which our Professor Einstein talks about, and unification is the perceiver former and his world perspective. The viewer of Damascus is equivalent to our definition of the perceiver former in the context of projection. This brings us to what Proclus says in his lead up to the fourth method. He says the whole scientific discourses, the unfoldment of the middle power, this is the middle that we have as the apex in the third method of the soul, is the engine, the machine, the engine of Plato's dialectic. And this is an exercise that prepares the soul, the viewer, in his psychology, for the unfoldment of the simplest internal perception or conception of the most simple assumption. The human mind enters within, says Socrates. And this is a stepwise inward and upward climbing through learning and contemplation in silence. Establishing the soul, the thinker, within an inward psychological port. And here we have our slide with in its apex we have intelligible unification, we have will intellect, and there we have a definition of arche, to lead, to show the way in one's own sphere of cognition, draws us to an end, to the end of our inquiry or the fulfillment of it. Here we have another Greek term, an anupotheton. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It means not put under, the simple assumption, the principle cannot be put under anything. On the right side we have an explanation of that with reference to our ladder you see there, the steps of ascent. Above which, we say the simple discovery is above which there's nothing to climb up to, there's no more climbing. This is a timeless individual endeavor. In sum, active life engagement and its exhaustive investigation establishes the contemplator within this inner internal port, that always reaching inward and upward to the good. Those ideas and their discovery that are wholly hidden and immaterial, not reflected yet in the world. We have, in our next slide, we have intelligible unification above the dialectic order. The prototype or exemplar of action, the leader, the arche. We have the inner port and individual endeavor, free choice of the individual, free election. And in the middle of our triangle, we have self-awareness, the practice of wisdom, knowledge, discrimination, silence, and solitude. We have the dialectic summit on the base here, the interactive middle, likeness, a well-seated internal nous or intellectual action. We are closing with a few remarks. Our presentation is projective in its psychological depth nature, and its contemplation and the unfoldment is above all seated in the present moment. What is self-awareness? Self-awareness is a property of the internal processes of active internal intellectual engagement in the present moment. Our triangular representations of the four methods is not a how-to guide or a manual, nor is it a representation that is seated in the linear passage of time. The mythology of everlasting and the mythology of beyond eternity itself applies here and plays a role in this internal discovery. It implies further an internal change in the relations of knowledge that governs your own perception. In addition, there is no way to control, to judge the internal ascent of the soul through these methods. It is internal. Indeed, the giving up of control of our outer world, giving up of the passions and our passionate beliefs, letting go, these are all crucial factors and facets of this internal psychological convertive processes. The disciplined control, however, must be taken over judgment, the swift moving, fast judgment of opinion, of attention, and we must exercise discipline in theoretical study and a rounded investigation of more than one subject. The rare discovery of these most simple principles advances our knowledge of the whole relative sensibility on cosmic scales as well as on individual scales. Simple assumptions is what rolls, and then knowledge is what rolls our psychical world forward in its energy and through its future, we may say, second-tier discoveries. The advancing, forward-rolling knowledge and future discovery of postulates is a construction by the human soul. The internal, free individual discovery of world postulates is the internal intellectual summit of discrimination. Free invention, the discovery of the most simple assumptions in this dialectic, which is active in the present psychological moment and movement, the internally forming and formative. Proclus says there's no methods that can be learned to aid the thinker at this level. This insight or internal forming discovery then is individualized for every man and woman and in every scientific investigation. No two individuals are the same, the world of difference. But here is the thing I would like to leave you with in this video. Did Einstein himself not say in his famous lectures that there is nothing that can be learned to prepare the thinker to aid him in this discovery? Many lifetimes and worlds apart, and these men say the same thing. Our next video will conclude the series.